So in our last visit to the Marvel Universe, we looked at Avengers Battle for Earth, a painfully mediocre game that was clearly made to cash in with the recently released Avengers film. Ever since the MCU movie started to take off, it's become clear that the film started to have a significant impact on the video games, such as character designs and plot ideas. So sometimes it's nice to take a step back to simpler times, where there's really only the comics to take inspiration from, which is exactly what we'll be doing today with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, a game that draws heavily from all corners of the Marvel comics in hopes of creating the ultimate celebration of Marvel and its characters. Just how successful were they? Let's find out as we turn the page to Marvel Ultimate Alliance for the Xbox 360. Marvel Ultimate Alliance is an action role-playing game where players can take control of up to 4 different Marvel characters at a time to punch, slash, and blast your way through baddies and a large selection of Marvel villains. This game was released for a lot of platforms, releasing on PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Xbox, Xbox 360, Wii, Game Boy, and the PSP. Most versions of the game played identically to each other, with the exception of the Game Boy version, which was a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. The PSP version had some exclusive characters though, like Black Widow, Captain Marvel, Ronan, and Hawkeye, though Hawkeye would later be DLC for the console version. Fun fact, Nintendo characters Samus Aran from Metroid and Link from The Legend of Zelda were originally supposed to be playable in the Wii version. However, supposedly the developers showed the characters on a PlayStation 2 version of the game to Nintendo, which angered them and demanded that the characters be removed entirely. That's such a shame, as a Spider-Man and Samus team-up sounds just as cool as it does ridiculous. Anyhow, Ultimate Alliance opens with Nick Fury and the Helicarrier under attack from Doctor Doom, who has assembled the largest team of supervillains, known as the Masters of Evil, in an attempt to obtain ultimate power and rule the world, and possibly even all of reality. Fury assembles his own team of heroes, with Iron Man, Wolverine, Captain America, and Spider-Man answering the call, with many more joining the fight not long after. With such a large team of heroes brought together, it's up to them to put a stop to Doom's plan and save the world. The plot of Ultimate Alliance is pretty straightforward, not too many surprises, as it ultimately serves as an excuse for the player to go across the many locations throughout the Marvel Universe, and encounter the various heroes and villains that it holds. On this front, Marvel Ultimate Alliance is a huge success. The game has over 140 different character appearances. I'll be honest, I'm a pretty big Marvel fan, one who keeps up with the comics, and even I didn't know who some of these characters were. Who is Starbolt? What the hell's an Atuma? But that's part of the fun with this game. It covers so much of the Marvel Universe and isn't afraid to celebrate it, even some of the lesser known characters. Speaking of characters, the roster features 25 playable characters, 33 if you have the DLC, and the selection available is fantastic. It has just the right amount of popular and slightly more obscure characters, at least obscure at the time, to make it interesting. It has a good balance that it doesn't feel like one particular Marvel series takes up too much of the roster compared to others. The Ultimate Alliance indeed. As a side note, I do appreciate going back to a time where all the characters used their comic book outfits. Yeah, a lot of them look really goofy, but what can I say? I have an appreciation for the classics. The gameplay of Ultimate Alliance is pretty simple. You pick your team of 4 characters and enter a stage. Each character has light and heavy close range attacks, a block, and a grab which you can use to throw enemies in a particular direction. Doing a combination between light and heavy attacks can also turn your attacks into launchers, trips, and stuns as well. Being an RPG, beating enemies earns you experience, which will level up your heroes. As you level up, you unlock various special moves that you can map to your character. These moves can range from a variety of different attacks based on the character's abilities, or status buffs that boost your team. While you can only have 3 of these equipped at a time, each character learns 8 different abilities, so there's plenty of room to experiment and play around with the various combinations available to you. Upon reaching level 10, each character gets an extreme attack, usable once the character's momentum gauge has been filled. Using this move does damage to everything in the area, and if a character uses this attack when other team members have full momentum, the other team members will also use their extreme. This can lead to massive damage, and it's just pretty cool to watch in action. I know I just explained a lot, but honestly the gameplay is incredibly simple and easy to pick up. Even with all the different abilities you have per character, when all you're doing is fighting in this game, the combat can get a little repetitive. But with such a large cast of characters, once you start to feel a little bit bored with one team, you can switch them out with a new group of heroes and play with them to keep things interesting. A game being simple isn't a bad thing, and the different ways Marvel Ultimate Alliance allows you to change up the basic gameplay prevents it from going stale as quickly as it otherwise would. Of course, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if I talked about the customization and not talk about the best customization feature in the game, the unlockable costumes. Each character has 4 unlockable costumes, which you unlock by beating enemies or completing certain challenge missions. Each costume is a reference to either past costumes the characters wore, or even appearances of other Marvel characters entirely. The easiest way to my heart is unlockable costumes, and even if I were to start finding the game to be a bit boring, which I personally wasn't, I would push through anyways just to see what other costumes would be available for my favorite heroes. Marvel Ultimate Alliance knocked it out of the park with the selection, especially since Wolverine's default outfit being his streetwear is a crime against humanity. That's better. Another praise I have for the game is that Marvel Ultimate Alliance takes you all over the Marvel universe, giving it a very unique set of locations. Atlantis, Mephisto's Realm, Asgard, Murder World, there's a lot of visual variety with these stages, and they usually have some unique gimmick to them that sets them apart from one another. Admittedly, I did not enjoy my time with Atlantis. Being underwater, your character has the ability to swim, which raises them off the ground level. If you want to get back to the ground, you need to wait until your character slowly sinks back to the bottom. This becomes especially tedious when you enter combat. Since you're swimming to get around, you're often higher up than your opponent, so if you don't want to completely whiff every attack, you need to wait to drop back down. This can let enemies get a number of hits in on you, and when this happens most combat encounters during the stage, it gets really annoying. However, you also get stages like Murder World, which is hands down the best location in the game. The level takes the idea of you being in an amusement park and just runs with it. You get to fight enemies using bumper cars, you get to fight on a giant pinball board, and there's even a part where you have to have one of your characters go inside an arcade game and play a level of Pitfall. Each room has a unique amusement park-like set piece, and oh man did I love this level. In each level you can also find various bonuses, such as concept art, upgrades, and simulator missions, the latter of which I'll address a bit later. One final thing about the stages is most locations have some sort of bonus objective that you need to find in order to fulfill a request from another character. Finding these usually requires you to go off the beaten path a bit. Fulfilling these requests can earn you experience and, perhaps more importantly, influences your ending. Upon beating the game, you see the consequences of completing or failing to complete these missions, with the results being pretty significant. For example, one of the first missions at the Omega base needs you to find and protect a computer. In the ending, it's revealed the computer had sensitive information for a virus that is deadly to mutants. If you protected this research, then a cure can be made, saving all of mutant kind. Failing, however, results in the death of many of the X-Men and soon every mutant on Earth. Your mileage may vary on whether or not you like these side missions, but I rather liked them. None of the missions I found were particularly tedious or difficult to do, and I like that feeling that my small actions had massive consequences. Plus, a lot of the different scenarios that can come to pass are really neat to see. Now, when you're not fighting your way through bad guys, you'll have some downtime in one of the game's hub bases. Here you can talk with various characters to get their input on the situation at hand, or you can participate in small side quests for bonus XP. One of my favorite things you can do is that you can play a little bit of trivia, which gets you some experience when you answer a question correctly. Finally, I'm being rewarded for my knowledge of comic books. Feels good. I mentioned earlier that you can find simulator missions throughout the various stages in the game. In the hub, you can access a training computer to play these missions. These just offer some extra challenges you can play through, which can give you some experience, better gear, and upgrades for your characters. Best of all, you'll find sim missions that are specific to certain characters, which when completed, unlocks the character's fourth and final costume. These missions themselves are nothing special, usually playing through just with whichever character the mission is named after without a team. So the stages themselves are not particularly difficult, just to make sure that you can get through them without too much frustration. There are other missions that allow the use of all 4 of your team members, so those ones can offer a bit more of a challenge. One aspect of the hub bases I'm going to complain about is that at the beginning of the game, you find a laptop belonging to Black Widow. This can allow you to start a side quest to figure out if Black Widow is actually a spy for Doctor Doom. This side quest takes about 75% of the game to complete, as you need to chip away at it after each mission. This is a very cool idea. Having a mystery that you slowly work at during your downtime between missions is really neat. But this mission just doesn't work. First of all, the end result of the mission actually gets briefly mentioned during the story proper anyways, so you're not really getting much of a bonus for finishing it. Second, the way the mission is supposed to work is that to advance the mission, you need to talk to a certain NPC, answer a question for them, and then come back after the next stage in order to do something similar, and continue to advance it. However, about halfway through the game, I kind of forgot about this mission for multiple stages. When I finally remembered about it, I went back and talked with Weasel, the NPC for the mission, to which he said my suggestion about the Baxter building wasn't right. I had no idea what he was talking about, as the Baxter building had nothing to do with what I last spoke to him about. What was actually happening was, despite not speaking to Weasel at all, the side mission still continues to advance anyways, as you progress through the main story. Which left me just confused as to what was happening. Then I did another story mission and came back, and all the other characters, like Wolverine, were talking about how upset they were that Fury was keeping some sort of big secret from them. But I had no idea what they were talking about. Then as I left the room, the event triggered where Fury tells them the big secret, and everyone is acting so surprised because this is the first time they should have been hearing this. The mission was just implemented so poorly, and wasn't really all that satisfying to begin with. What a shame. Graphically, the game has shown its age in a lot of areas, such as the characters' faces and body movements during cutscenes. The game does have some really nice CG cutscenes mixed in, however, that look pretty great. Another part of the game that is a bit of a mixed bag is the sound design. None of the music was particularly memorable to me. It got the job done, but nothing I'd be thinking about once the game was turned off. The music was also weirdly inconsistent. Sometimes the music would be so loud that when other characters spoke, it became really hard to make out what they were saying.
You may have defeated those incompetent louts throughout my palace, but now you'll face the power of the Mandarin!
Other times it would just cut out entirely, leaving no music and just making things feel kinda awkward. Lastly, the voice acting is very hit or miss for each character. I don't think any of the performances here are bad, but with so many characters, some performances feel a little flat or stilted.
I was hoping to catch someone being a hero. Looks like I hit the jackpot!
To be honest though, this is more of a nitpick, as most characters don't stick around too much to deliver more than a few lines each. With one or two exceptions, most of the playable characters sound good, with some standout performances like Steve Blum as Wolverine and Venom.
Well then, why don't you listen to the lovely sounds of me shredding you into little teeny bits? It's your funeral. Enjoy.
The last comment I'll make about this game is I think it's very enjoyable if you are a Marvel fan. The game is loaded with content and has enough nods to the comics that there's something there for every fan, no matter which series you're more familiar with. If you're not a Marvel fan, well, this game probably won't make you become one. The game expects you to at least be relatively familiar with the characters and world of the Marvel Universe. There are various moments of dialogue where you can select to get insight about certain characters and locations, and the character-specific sim missions usually has the character telling the player their backstory. But because there are so many characters in this game, not all of them get the appropriate time in the spotlight for a player to really get an understanding of who they are and what they are about, such as Spider-Woman or Moon Knight. So if you didn't come into the game already as a fan of a specific character, you're probably not going to leave as a fan of that character either. I know for many this is a moot point, as this being a crossover game, it should seem natural that players should be at least familiar with who these characters are. That's a fair point, but some may recall in my J-Stars video, I mentioned that the game got me interested in a number of series because of how the characters were represented there. I just can't really say this was the case for Marvel Ultimate Alliance. This game seems aimed more for people who are already fans and familiar with the Marvel Universe, not really for those wanting to become a fan. At least that's how I see it. Marvel Ultimate Alliance was a great time. As a fan of the comics, this game fires on all cylinders with content and fan service, from characters to locations and to the unlockable costumes. The gameplay is simple, but there's enough playable heroes and ways to customize said heroes to keep things interesting for a good while. However, this game is not easy to recommend to those less familiar with Marvel, as the game doesn't really do enough to help ease newcomers into the Marvel universe. However, if you are a fan, this game is a real treat to play, and you're bound to find something here for you. Despite a few weaknesses in some areas, I love Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and as such will be placing it at the number 4 spot in my ranking, putting it ahead of Way of the Samurai 3, but not quite enough to have it surpass Alien Isolation. A very comfortable spot in the ranking nevertheless. Next time, we'll be taking a look at the Silent Hill series, but not one of the games made by Team Silent. If you know Silent Hill, you know what that means. If not, you'll just have to wait until you can see for yourself. In the meanwhile, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.